People are just tired. They're exhausted from wearing masks. They're exhausted from everything at this point. If you're feeling exhausted or COVID fatigued, you can build your resilience. That is the most practical tip. Take care of yourself.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Bosch. I'm your host, Jessica Dahl. Today, we want to talk about mental health. So now more than ever in COVID times, we've all been faced with a lot more uncertainty and stress than we're probably used to. And we wanted to bring on some experts from both inside and outside of Bosch to highlight the challenges we're facing and some practical and tangible tips and things we can do as individuals and as organizations, big and small. I also wanted to just remind our listeners that this podcast, it's not intended to be official medical advice. And if you do have physical or mental challenges, we really encourage you to contact a healthcare professional. And as with any episode where we have a guest from another organization, the views expressed in this episode are those of the speaker and not necessarily Bosch. So without further delay, let me introduce our guests. Today, joining us, we have Jason Youngblood. He's a director of Cigna's Behavioral Center of Excellence. Jason's a licensed professional counselor in the state of Maryland and a personal trainer, and he focuses on the link between mind and body and the impact to overall wellness. Also joining us today, we have Dave Kaprielian. He's a director of HR benefits at Bosch, and Dave works with our external partners like Cigna to create attractive programs for our current and our future workforce. So welcome, Jason and Dave. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I know I just gave a very brief intro for each of you, but it'd be great if you want to share a bit more about who you are and what you do, maybe what drives you to do this type of work. Jason, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So I am a licensed professional counselor, as you mentioned, which means I have a master's degree in psychology and a license to practice independently as a clinician. And found my way to Cigna, maybe 15, 16 years ago, working in behavioral health, clinical operations and case management and crisis support, and really just kind of fell in love with my ability to do really good clinical work in this setting. And the role really transformed into me becoming an ambassador to the world of behavioral health now for clients, just like when I was seeing individuals one-on-one and helping them to navigate to a better place and address their challenges. My team and I, my team of clinicians, now do that with companies.
And that's a perfect segue for you, Dave, from the other side, from inside of an organization.
Yeah, sure, Jessica, thank you. And thanks, Jason, for that explanation. As the director of benefits here for Bosch in the United States, I look at the fact that we have 30,000 associates and family members that rely on us. It's no surprise to anyone that, during this time of COVID, when there's a significant change in their individual behaviors and maybe how they work and how they're interacting at work and at home, and the anxiety that the uncertainty of the environment creates, that we need partners like Cigna. I've been in the benefits world for over 30 years and joined Bosch 3 or 4 years ago to help them and help guide these programs as we move forward. So, Jason, thank you. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. I feel like this is a really great team effort to talk about these topics, give a lot of perspective. So let's dive right in. I want to talk about, as we've said, mental health, and especially in times of unknown and stressful times like the current pandemic. First thing I want to talk about is COVID fatigue. Maybe our listeners, you've heard this phrase, maybe you'd call it something else, but I think probably most of us have experienced this. Jason, maybe could you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a general fatigue of having to see it on the news, to hear about it continuously, nonstop, but just really that sense of fatigue around having to hear about it all day, every day, having to make adjustments in your life. So it's just a general sense of exhaustion around news coverage, being tuned into it impacting or impeding your day-to-day activities, it requiring changes to the way that you live your life. And I think along with COVID fatigue, that exhaustion comes a bit of desensitization too. Maybe you've had it, maybe you've known people who have it, maybe you have not. And I think that along with that exhaustion or fatigue comes kind of a bit of loosening up personally around being careful, or, just especially as holidays are coming up or maybe approaching special times, birthdays, anniversaries, just wanting to kind of slip back into the old way of doing things for now. So just kind of loosening up. I think that's all part of the exhaustion.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know I've definitely felt all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel like that COVID fatigue is impacting workers, and their families and kids and that work-life balance?
From my perspective, and my own personal perspective, because I am a behaviorist and a lead at Cigna in this area, but I'm also an individual and an employee, and I have two children who are online learning right now at home with me, and my wife is a teacher, and she's teaching in the room next to me, and I can hear her teaching, which is a little bit unique. And so I think just that general sense of it really has shifted everything that we do day to day. And then through the workforce, through the workplace, typically I am out and about. I am meeting people face to face. I am doing presentations. I am engaging with people. I'm really passionate about that work. My ability to do my work in that way has really been removed. It's been taken away. And I try to keep in mind that that is temporary. And so Skype meetings, WebEx, Zoom meetings, whatever it may be, it is a substitute, but not a replacement. And so for me personally, I have found it difficult to keep my own motivation kind of focused. My own sense of purpose in the work that I do is kind of fundamentally been called up into question here. And so I've seen that in my own workforce. I think in my one-on-ones with all of my team members, all of them are feeling that same sense. And I think that just expands out to all of the organizations that we support and workers. People are just tired. They're exhausted. They're exhausted from Zoom meetings. They're exhausted from wearing masks. They're exhausted from everything at this point. And I think it really, as we enter into a colder, darker period from a seasonal perspective, and when seasonal depression and anxiety tend to kick up here, we're entering into a little bit of a precarious time.
And Jessica, I completely agree with everything that Jason just said. And in my role, I worry about really the diversity of our workforce. Everybody's a little unique, and everybody's background is a little unique, and anxiety and expectations around this are unique. And we have to make sure we meet them exactly where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have some examples of maybe things that we are doing or looking at doing, or ideas to help, even other organizations implement something?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that the programs that we offer through Cigna are excellent programs that allow people access so that if they're having anxiety, they can reach out. And it's part of our standard benefit offering. We made sure that was robust. We know that I would say probably one of the largest things that we've tried to do is we've tried to engage with the leadership to really make sure that we're extremely sensitive around the anxieties that their associates are probably going through, and reaching out to them to make sure that there's good understanding about their specific situations.
Yeah, I think what we just heard, asking people, how they're doing, is so important. But not only asking the question, taking time to genuinely listen. I think it's really important to ask employees how they're staying connected to coworkers, because that's really the challenge here. So more so like a deeper level than just how are you doing, but how are you staying connected? Because we know that connectedness, that social connection, really helps buffer stress. And so we've all been challenged with staying connected and sharing, leadership. I encourage leaders to talk about their own struggles, to talk about their own personal lives as appropriate, how they're staying connected, because I think that is a great example of both challenge and, positives as well. I think that some of the things that, are mentioned, employee assistance programs, so simple, like the most overlooked simple benefit I think that is out there. I think now 2020 and beyond is going to be the time of employee assistance programs, because they are providing the kind of support that really are needed. So, from face-to-face or virtual connections with a clinician, So if I'm struggling with an issue, or I'm struggling with a parenting issue, or balancing helping my kids with their work versus my own work versus my own angst and anxiety about all of the uncertainty, I can talk to somebody outside of my house about it, and I can do it at no cost. I can do it now virtually. Um, I don't have to leave my house. And quite frankly, COVID or no COVID, I don't really want to go sit in a therapist office. That sounds terrible for a therapist to say, but I'm really busy, and I just appreciate the ability to do my research online, to find that person and to make that connection in my own time and my own space. So in addition, those EAP programs offer work-life support, so childcare needs, elder care support, even pet care support, and things like that, legal and financial support, all of these things that impact us during times of COVID and non-COVID, but especially now, we need all of the help and support and resources. So our EAP programs here at Cigna are seeing kind of unprecedented utilization year over year, and I hope it's the reawakening of that part of the support that we offer. I think that the industry is responding in our ability to get people connected to care. That has been the real challenge, I think, as there's a shortage of behavioral health care providers, is how do you get people connected when they need help? And now more people than ever are reaching for help and support. In general, 1 out of 5 people will have a mental health condition. With COVID, the increased stress and anxiety, we're seeing that creep up to 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5. And so more people are asking for help and support. Our ability to get them connected and now give them more options to get connected, whether it be face-to-face or virtually, text therapy, video therapy, whatever it may be, has become essential. And those are the directions that our programs are headed very quickly. This was in the works prior to COVID, but COVID really helped accelerate, and I think will fundamentally change the face of behavioral health care in the United States and across the world.
I feel like too, with that, I mean, think we were seeing a trend a little bit before COVID of mental health normalizing talking about it and the stigma around it. But then exactly what you said, the acceleration, I feel I've seen it just in my own conversations personally, even in the office or virtually in the office, around that topic, and people being less uncomfortable with talking out loud about, wow, I had a lot of anxiety today. Like, it's really actually very comforting. And like, I feel like it kind of peels away a layer that helps you work better with each other and with more empathy, no matter what, in the office or not,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I have seen over the last decade or so, from it not being discussed in the workplace to now it's being discussed at every level, even in the C-suite, in the workplace, on down right to the front line. And it's been great. Today, studies should suggest that 4 out of 10 people with a need will ever get care for that need. So whether that's because of stigma or access, we still have a far way to go. I mean, just imagine if only 4 out of 10 people with medical conditions ever received care. That's a staggering thought. But I think over the last few years, I agree with you. We are talking about it more. And now we need to not only talk about it, but make sure people are getting connected and getting support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's easy for everyone to focus on parents. I'm also a parent with kids that have had their in-person school, which brings its own stress, but they have gone back virtual here and there. And my husband's also a teacher, so I can relate a bit to that. But I think we tend to focus on that being the biggest, group of stress. But I feel like there's also, then we kind of do a disservice to those who are single, or like you said, taking care of elderly, or maybe those who are alone, in their homes. And I think that's something just to even just mention that's, obviously very important. How are you seeing a different increase in, maybe those with children seeking out care over those with single, or maybe just like a different type of situation, or is it kind of a mix?
I think it's across the board. So over, at Cigna, our behavioral claims and utilization is up year over year, like over 20%. So like I mentioned, more people are reaching out. And I think, we're seeing people across the board. I think your call out is excellent. There are people who are living alone, there are some people, we all have unique needs. And so some people might be really happy to be isolated at this time and on their own. Quite frankly, there are times that I would love to be alone.
Right.
So I think you're absolutely right. There are seniors. Cigna just did a resilience study, and we looked at resilience over the lifespan. And what we found is that our seniors are amongst the most resilient, as well as our small children. Who's least resilient are our middle schoolers on up through 18 to 21-year-olds. So people entering the workforce are the least resilient. And so I think that we have seen, especially that Gen Z group presenting for treatment, but it is across the board. People are, I think, reaching out and engaging. And from my perspective, we're giving them new ways to engage, whether that is through like resilience type applications or online cognitive behavioral therapy, in addition to face-to-face sessions. So people have different ways to engage. The idea of you get behavioral health care by talking to someone like me, that's the front door. That's become very quickly antiquated, which is excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
we talked, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, that's okay. Jessica, one of the things that we have seen is very consistent. We've seen our usage for our associates of our EAP program increase over the past couple of years. We've had specific programs to try and make sure that people understand it, know it. We're advertising for that so that they feel that they can get the help that they need. And we've seen that increase in utilization. We also have obviously during this more recent stress seen the same trends that Jason's pointing out as an organization that they're seeing. We're seeing it as well within our specific statistics.
Thank you, Jason and David. And again, this is not medical advice. If you have physical or mental challenges, please contact a healthcare professional. So when we talk about kind of practical ways we can support ourselves, our families, our coworkers, whether you're in a leadership position or not, we talked a little bit about simply, the asking how they're staying connected, maybe changing the way you ask someone how they are and actually listening. What about some other practical tips, getting outside, things like that, would you recommend for those that need some just practical tips to stay mentally healthy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The best piece of advice I got on an airline. One day I was sitting there, I was boarding the plane. They were going through like the pre-flight operation. I put on my headphones and I happened to tune in to the safety check, which, I've heard it a million times. And I don't know why that day I just happened to start listening in. And they were just going through and they said, hey, if we lose pressure in the plane and the oxygen masks do drop, put your oxygen mask on. If you are traveling with people who rely on you for help, you put yours on first before you put theirs on. And so I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, I would think if my kids were sitting beside me, my first priority would be to get the oxygen masks on my children. And then, of course, as I thought about it, I realized, you know what? If I don't have oxygen, I can't take care of my kids and keep them safe. And that really, I think, makes sense on an airplane. But when you pull back and you think about putting your own needs and yourself and your well-being first as a key to being able to take care of others around you, it really, it doesn't necessarily feel that that's intuitive. It doesn't feel natural to put yourself first. And so I suggest really stopping to think about that and really begin prioritizing your own well-being, because when you are taking better care of yourself physically and mentally and emotionally, and I'm talking everything from making sure that you are getting regular exercise and carving time out for that, whether it's part of your workday, before work or after work, but being selfish about that time and making sure if it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you do it. Making sure that you are staying appropriately hydrated and taking vitamins and eating and taking time out for you to stay mentally well will help you, whether it's taking care of your children, checking in on elderly relatives, taking care of your neighbors at work. I can tell you when my balance of self-care is off, my employees know. And so a few weeks ago, one of my employees on a particularly rough day said, hey, did you get your run in at lunch? And I hadn't. And so for me, my employees know me well enough that they say, you know what, why don't you go take a run? And so I would say the very first is put your oxygen mask on first. That is the most practical tip. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. It's funny that you say that. I hadn't thought about it in that perspective. But when I'm working at home, my situation is I work at home. And so I realized that I don't have a commute anymore, either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. So there's no transition period from home to work and then back home. And so I found that I had to do something in that time period. So every morning and every evening, before work and after work, instead of a commute, I would go for a walk. I'd go for about a 45-minute walk. There was a path close by my house. I'd go down and I'd come back. And then when I was done with my walk, I'd sit down and I'd jump on the computer and start engaging in the day. And when my day was over, I would jump into my tennis shoes and I'd go for my 45-minute walk, pretty much the same walk every day. But it was my transition time from work life to home life. And that was very helpful to me to get me right and get my mindset as to what I'm either about to encounter or change from and into this new setting.
Well, that's really good, Dave. I think ideally, I've tried to do similar things, and sometimes it just doesn't work as a working mom, or when there's chaos happening. And sometimes it's simple for me, at least, like simply shutting my computer and putting it away where I can't see it, because there's times I work all over my house, depending on what's going on.
Sure.
So it's not like everyone has an office door to shut and kind of have that transition. And sometimes it's like that, it's like the process of shutting it, moving away from it, not seeing it anymore. And then so there's little things too, I think people can do if you're not able to take the time for a longer walk or transition. But those are really good practical tips.
And I also want to relate this back to this COVID fatigue. When in March, when we were self-isolating, we started doing that, I made sure that I called my team members, every morning, or at least touch base with somebody. How are you doing? How's it going? How are you feeling? Etc. And that's tapered off for me. This is actually reminding me that I've got to continue that engagement. I'm not doing that as frequently as I used to. So this habit that I got into because I knew there was a new normal and making sure people were eased into that. My behavior has lapsed just a little bit in terms of making sure that we're connected. And I've got to remember to go back and do those things to make sure that we stay connected as a group, as a team, and as an organization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of people listening are feeling the same, because same thing for me. We did the same thing as a team, and it's kind of tapered off and slowed down a bit. But you're right. And I think also, like, not assuming that everyone feels the same as you. So if you're kind of feeling great about everything right now today, and not as anxious or not as stressed, and doesn't mean that those you're working with or those around you aren't struggling. So maybe when you're having a good day, to really make that a priority, to reach out to those when you have the energy to kind of give, like maybe the oxygen mask reference, when you put that oxygen mask on yourself, you're able to give more for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really good. So you talked a bit about that resilience practice, Jason. What does that look like?
Well, so I think for myself as a therapist, resilience has always been fascinating to me. Resilience is our ability to bounce back from particularly challenging times or events. And, as a therapist, people would come in with various issues or traumas. And I would tend to notice there were some people who would perhaps recover more quickly, and others who were a little bit more challenged. And that really gets down to resilience. And so Cigna just completed a resilience study. I think they looked at over 10,000 people, completed the survey, really found out some amazing things from that. And that is, small children are the most resilient amongst us. And by the time kids hit middle school, it starts to go down. And my youngest just hit middle school. And so it continues to drop to the all-time low of 18 to 22. So for us, If you've got employees entering the workforce, folks in their early 20s, understand we know the most lonely generation, but also at the point in their lives where they're least resilient and probably could use a little bit of extra support. The good news is, as we get a little bit older and when we have kids, we tend to get more resilient again. And then by the time we're seniors, we figured it all out. And seniors tend to be honestly the least lonely and amongst the most resilient of all of the age groups. So there's this nice U-shaped curve with resilience. The takeaway when I looked at the study for me was that children are born naturally resilient, and we learn bad habits over the course of our lifetime. And nobody has ever said, yes, middle school was the best time of my life. So,
right.
So yeah, we learn bad habits. And so for me, I think the silver lining here is just as we learn those bad habits, we can unlearn those bad habits no matter what age we are. And we can make ourselves more resilient. And so if you are feeling challenged, if you're feeling exhausted or COVID fatigued, you can build your resilience in your ability to bounce back. I think mindfulness is a really big piece of that, and understanding where you're challenged, processing it through. And that's something that we can start, with our kids as they're young. I would say, look at your kids. They've probably been through a lot. If you've got kids or kids, what can we learn from them about how they're coping, about how they're bouncing back?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I feel like my kids teach me all the time. It's like holding a mirror to your face, and you see the good and the bad. But I mean, my son just the other day was so frustrated, and he's 8. He's still learning to manage different emotions. And I was so impressed, and I kind of took a lesson from it. He was so mad about something that was very small, and he went outside on the porch and came back in, and I'm like, what just happened? Why were you outside? What are you doing? He said, I just needed to take a minute to calm down so I wouldn't be angry because I wasn't able to think clearly. I'm like, he's 8, I'm like, okay, good reminder. When I'm feeling frustrated or extra anxious, just take a minute to breathe and think clearly. It was just simple, but powerful reminder.
Yeah, that is awesome.
That's really good. And, it makes me want to go hug a bunch of middle schoolers if we could, because gosh, we all know what that time is like. And especially now with social media and all of the extra stress, man, that's tough. I maybe, reach out if you're listening and someone in middle school or in their early 20s, just reach out, think of them. They're struggling most likely, right? I mean,
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. So do you guys, I know, Jason, you kind of talked a bit about the best advice being, the oxygen mask. And I always like to ask on our show, what's the best advice you've ever gotten personal or career-wise? Would you say that was yours, or do you have another one that you wanted to share?
I think the best advice that I've ever gotten was just a simple phrase. It was go to what you know. And so I'm a behaviorist, and I'm living in this world of sales and account management, business, a very business environment. And I usually feel like a fish out of water, quite frankly. And so I found myself in business situations where sometimes I've just felt out of my depth. And one of my supervisors previously had said to me, when you feel that way, always go to what you know. And that kind of stuck in my head. And I actually had an experience where, in trying to help out, I agreed to cover a meeting with 45 people at an open enrollment event, which was supposed to be just giving out materials, handing out pamphlets. I can do that. It turned out I walked into this very prestigious organization, and they wanted an open enrollment presentation, which I did not have. That and being a behaviorist, I could only talk about behavioral health benefits and not dental. And so as I walked in, I got a little panicky and overwhelmed. And literally, I had to remove myself, per your last story. I had to remove myself and calm myself down, locked in the bathroom for about 5 minutes. And so I walked back into the room, and I pulled out, I have little stress cards, which are like little mood rings, and I gave them out, and I started with a stress activity, because I can't talk about benefits, but I can talk about stress. And choosing benefits is stressful. And then I led I facilitated, I didn't lead the discussion, I facilitated a discussion with the benefit leaders in the room about how they go about changing or choosing plans, how they evaluate. And it actually ended up being a really good discussion. And we got great feedback on it. And it was in that moment as I was hyperventilating and I was panicking, just go to what you know. And I went to what I knew and it worked itself out. And so when I find myself really just pressed, I just go back to being to what I know. I can listen, I can facilitate, I can reflect. And those things, those core strengths that I have in every situation have been very helpful to me throughout my career. So a simple phrase, but really, if you approach every situation from your point of strength, you typically will find your way through.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think too, like you kind of alluded to just now, it's those strengths have always showed up for you. And so like reminding yourself of the times that they have worked, when you're going to what you know, and hey, this has worked for me most of the time. I'm going to go back to that. This is what I'm good at. Yeah. And I kind of chuckled when you said you locked yourself in the bathroom because I've been there so many times. And I remember went to go give like one of my first, basically having to present in front of a large group of people, which is not my forte. I'm much more comfortable behind this audio machine here. But I remember it was my turn next and I was like, nope, I'm not going to do this anymore. I cannot. I was so nervous. All of a sudden I was like, I can't do this. What do I have to say? And I went to the bathroom and I literally, and this is getting real vulnerable and probably embarrassing, but I did the Rocky theme song and literally like jumped up and down to get some of my like adrenaline out, was just like in a moment of like, hey, you have this, like this is what you were asked to do this. You're strong, you can do this. And went back out and it went well. But I've had many moments, in random places where I'm coming back to those strengths for sure. That's really good. So Dave, do you have anything that you wanted to share on, your best advice you've ever gotten?
Yeah, I've got a couple. But the one that I continue to share with my team is when you're tackling a problem and you feel that you're all by yourself, you're probably doing something wrong. And I say that because we're a part of a team. And if you feel that you're isolated and by yourself, you're not reaching out to your team members to help you. And that anxiety of being alone and being isolated creates uncertainty and fear and a whole bunch of emotions. So remember that you're part of a team that will help you if you're struggling with an aspect. And that's true of the benefits that we offer as well. If there's something that you're tackling, there is people that are available to you. There are resources that are available to you. You just have to have that comfort to reach out, to grab those resources, and that confidence that those resources that are available, the people that are available, are there to support you, and really encourage my team to reach out as I was encouraged to reach out when I felt alone and isolated. There's a second one that I actually, somebody had received and passed it along that I continue to use all the time, and that is just never give up. When you're dealing with an issue, never give up, keep going. And at some point we get through every tunnel. And that idea that you're going to get through this no matter where you are in your journey is important to me, because there's sometimes I feel overwhelmed with the workload that I have or with the task at hand. And this idea that I'm going to get through it, I'm going to get to the other side, it helps me and helps motivate me and prevents me from getting stuck in the middle of this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. You guys, this has been so good. I wanted to kind of wrap up here. Do you have any recommendations for resources or references for those who maybe want to learn more, have any questions that they can go and do some seeking on their own?
From my perspective, at Cigna.com/coronavirus, it's open to the public as well as our customers. There's some spectacular resources, and I go there often myself. There's a symptom checker there, and it's been a handful of times I've done the symptom checker and found out that I likely have anxiety and allergies. So a symptom checker has nailed it several times. I also used it with my kids. There's also some great resources on there for how to deal with uncertainty, anxiety, depression. There's a bunch of little YouTube videos out there about how to talk to your employees, how to support your elderly loved ones. There's a lot of really great content, pretty well organized. And as I'm organizing myself often, I find myself there. So lots of good stuff kind of all put out there together in one space. And so check it out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Dave, do you have anything you wanted to add for resources?
My focus would be more on our associates, our employees,
Sure.
and that we do have a broad range of benefit programs that are available to you. Talk to your peers, talk to your HR business partners, and find out more about the programs that are available to you, because we do value our associates' wellness and well-being and mental health. And so we have these resources available to make sure that you have access to the care that you need.
Well, thank you, Jason and Dave, for joining us today. And for our listeners, thank you for joining. I also wanted to just remind our listeners that this podcast, it's not intended to be official medical advice. And if you do have physical or mental challenges, we really encourage you to contact a healthcare professional. Dave or Jason, do you have anything else you want to leave with the audience?
I would say put your oxygen mask on, go take a walk, and think about how it makes you feel.
And I think that's a great summary. And Jessica, really just to say thank you for inviting us to this podcast. I really appreciate the time here with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you both for your time as well.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Bosch Podcast. In case you missed our other episodes, now's your chance. Go back and take a listen.